Hello everybody, welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia and today I'm going to do my May TBR. It's May 1st, it's time to talk about the May books. And I'm just hoping that May turns out to be a little smoother than April, because April, it came in like a lamb and it went out like a pile of lamb poop. It was things got a little rocky there in the second half of the month, but hopefully we will be turning a corner soon. But we'll talk about all that. I'll do a little catch up on that stuff on Friday Reads. But let's talk today about the May books. So I'm going to begin with a couple of books that are sort of carryovers that I'm not finished with. And the first one is a book I'm reading right now, The Devils Arithmetic by Jane Yolen. This was a winner of the National Jewish Book Award. It came out, I think it was in around 1990-ish. Let's see. First published in 1988. This is a time travel novel. The age group would be, it's really best for middle school. I would say upper elementary and middle school, but the content is pretty serious, so I think middle school is a good target age for this book. And in this book we have Hannah, a young girl who's about to turn 13 in the current day, and she finds her family's holiday get-togethers to be incredibly tedious. It's just totally boring, long-winded. She doesn't understand why they do the same rituals every year at Passover, and she's just kind of over the whole thing. And then this one year, they're at the Seder. She goes to do the symbolic opening of the door to let in Elijah, and when she opens the door, she is teleported through time back to 1942, and all of a sudden she is in a village of she's in a Jewish village that might have some connection to her own family and heritage, and they are getting swept up and taken to Auschwitz. Hannah is the only person who understands what is happening, but as time goes on, she kind of begins to lose the crispness of her memories about the current time, and she is just living it in the setting that she's in. So it's scary. We have historical fiction, we have the time travel, we have the framework of the current day, and the kid gaining perspective on what it all means. So I guess I'm about halfway through, but I'm enjoying this a lot. It's reminded me of other books that I've read about the Holocaust and other time travel books and even some fantasy books. I've started this tape a couple of times because I keep getting stuck. Like, I have this way of getting stuck right at the beginning, and then once I get started, then I'm fine. So I started this video over a couple of times because I got tongue-tied, and I can't remember if I already said this is a buddy read with Michael Clark, and we did delay it. It was supposed to be a little while ago, but because I went out of town for a week and didn't bring my book, we just started yesterday. So I'm only halfway through, and I'll say more about it on Friday after we finish reading it and discussing it. But I'm enjoying it very much. I thought it was a reread, but it's not a reread. I never read it. It was one of those books. As a teacher and a librarian, there's certain books that I'm just really familiar with, and I could talk to a kid about it or recommend it or whatever, even though I actually didn't read it. I might have just skimmed it or something like that. So, which is kind of a survival skill when you have a library with 10,000 books in it. You can't read them all. So anyway, that's my excuse. I never read the Devils Arithmetic, but I'm reading it now, and it's good. I'm also still reading Poetry Unbound, which is a book I selected for Poetry Month in April. Okay, I put this camera in a different spot, and now I'm like all over the place trying. Ooh. But this is 50 poems to open your world. I've talked about the format before. There's a poem. Most of them are contemporary, but there's a few older ones, and then there's a little essay by Padraig Tuama about just his thoughts on this poem, his reflections on it, maybe a little bit about the poet, maybe a little bit of analysis of the structure, but mostly just that emotional connection to each poem. And so I have been in no rush, and I did not take this with me either on our trip. So I'm about a little more than halfway through, and I'm just going to continue enjoying these in May. I hope I can keep renewing it from the library until I'm finished, because I don't feel like rushing. Sometimes I stop and stay on one poem and come back to it, for the day, and then other times I read 2 or 3. So I shalleth not be rushed, and hopefully I can hang on to it until I'm actually finished. So now we can get into the books that I have particularly selected for May. And I am only participating in one official booktube event for May, and that is Mental Health May. This event is in its 2nd year, and it is co-hosted by Marilyn, Maya Mendoza, and Kim from Middle of the Book March. And I'm going to put their announcement videos for the event in the notes. And if you have not been watching Marilyn, Maya Mendoza, and Middle of the Book March, you are missing out on one of life's essential pleasures, and you need to go in there and subscribe right now, because they are 2 remarkable women with fantastic booktube channels. And this event highlights the importance of mental health, and also expanding our knowledge and understanding of mental illness. To participate in the event, you have only to read at least one book that somehow touches upon aspects or themes of mental health or mental illness. So it could be a fiction book, a nonfiction book, poetry, a memoir, a biography of someone, whatever works for you that fits in a rather large umbrella of the topic of mental health and mental illness. And then there's also a theme, which is self-care. So I'm going to talk about a few books that I feel will fit into this concept this month, and that I am looking forward to reading. So first of all, I have selected a fiction and a nonfiction book that deal with aspects of mental illness. And my nonfiction book is a book that I have been wanting to read for years. It's been on my list forever, and for reasons I cannot explain, I still have never read it, and that is The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. And this is a memoir, a particularly difficult year in Joan Didion's life, and that's an understatement. And it is about the year, it begins at the end of 2003 and goes into 2004, when first her daughter suffered one and then another very severe illness, and also her husband unexpectedly passed away. And so all these things happened close together and kind of all at the same time. I think the daughter was in the hospital, and then her husband just had a massive heart attack at their home. Joan Didion describes this book as her attempt to make sense of the weeks and then months that cut loose any fixed idea I ever had about death, about illness, about marriage and children and memory, about the shallowness of sanity, and about life itself. So I think it's going to be beautifully written, but probably tough as well, because it's about grief and marriage and parenthood and all those things intertwined. And I have always heard about how wonderful it is, and so I'm looking forward to reading it, even though it's probably going to be incredibly sad. And also a book that I just found it was in my haul, and I found it at the library book sale, the used bookstore that was in the San Antonio Public Library, is All My Puny Sorrows by Miriam Toews. I've heard that is how she pronounces her name. Sonia has informed me. And several people chimed in and said this was their favorite book by this author and how much they love this book. It sounds like one of those amazing character-driven novels that I'm really going to love, that is both just heartbreaking, but it's also funny. It's about 2 sisters. One looks very successful on the surface, world-renowned pianist, glamorous, wealthy, and happily married. The other one looks like she's the mess because she's broke, she's divorced, she's grappling with 2 teenagers. But the one who appears to have all the success has suicidal ideations, and the other sister is desperately wanting her sister to not commit suicide. So it sounds like a downer of a subject, but the way it's described and the way people have reviewed it, I am filled with hope and anticipation about the warmth and just the beauty of the relationships in this novel. That's what I'm expecting. So I cannot wait to read all my Puny Sorrows, and it will be my first book by this author whose name I don't understand how that can be Toews, but I will accept it. So I also have two books that I'm planning to read this month, and one I actually did just start this morning, and I think that they reflect the self-care part of mental health May. And the first one is a book I've been wanting to read for a while, Leonard and Hungry Paul by Ronan Hession. And this has been sitting on my cart for quite a few months, and I keep pulling it out, and I think it's been in a couple of TBRs. And I feel like that for me, coming off of a really, really rocky couple of weeks, this is the perfect book for a self-care read. And it is about two men who are in their 30s and live at home with their parents, except one of them has recently, his mother had just passed away as the book opens. And so he's a little bit, he's kind of floating loose a little bit because he's always lived with his mom. The other man lives with his mom and dad, but they're not weird or creepy. They're not like odd sons in the basement in weird online forums. They're just like these nice guys who are content with their lives and their friends. And that's all I know about this so far. There's just like these two guys that are just kind of low-key and friendly. But Leonard is kind of, just the part I've read, the first few chapters, changes in the air because his mother has passed and he's thinking maybe he needs to branch out and do a little bit more with his life. And he has this job. I really love his job. He writes encyclopedia and nonfiction for children's books. He writes the actual, they send him the facts, and he writes the text in the age-appropriate format for the kids. I think that's kind of a cool job. So he's kind of thinking about doing something more. And Hungry Paul, I don't know why this is his nickname. The event going on in his family is his sister is about to get married. So that's as far as I've gotten. I really like the vibe. I like the low-keyness of it. Every now and then I just want to read one of those quieter novels, and I don't know if anything dramatic at all is going to happen in this book or what, but I'm here for it, and I think it is just the right speed for me for this week. And the other one that I am calling a healthcare book, what did I say? A self-care book. And I'll explain why I think it fits this category in a second, but let me tell you about this book. This is a book that I heard about on Lindy's channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads, another great channel that you better be watching. So, hey Lindy, that book came in at the library. I get so many good recommendations from Lindy's channel, but I was able to get a copy of The Antiracist Kitchen. This is a book for kids, and what it says 21 stories and recipes. So it is this multicultural book in which a bunch of different writers talk about their experiences with race, and it's in the context of food and recipes. So here's what it says on the back. A celebration of food, family, activism, and resistance in the face of racism, this collection features stories and recipes from 21 award-winning North American children's book authors. They share the role of food in their lives and the personal and sometimes difficult experiences they've had growing up as racialized people. And so, look, just randomly, I'm opening up to Wapgig Shigrice, who's a favorite of mine. I see Alinda Sue Park has an entry in here called Girl Scout Breakfast. And then there's a recipe after each of their essays. And I just think this just looks really uplifting and compelling and inspiring. I chose this for a couple of reasons. First of all, just because it looked really great when Lindy showed it. And then secondly, I chose it for a Montana Book Company category about activism. And I thought this fits that bill, but it's kind of different. Like, this is where the self-care comes in. I wanted to read a book about activism, but I didn't really want to read an angry political book right now. I mean, I'm getting enough of that on the news, and I I don't have my head in the sand, but I didn't want to read a whole book like that right now. So I thought this is perfect, a kid's book. The intro talks about using cooking and food as a way to bring people together and to talk about racism, tolerance, allyship, empathy, apologies, and restoration. So I will talk more about it as I actually read it. But to me, that was self-care because I wanted to read a book along these lines, but a certain kind of book. So I think this will be perfect. The next two books are a buddy read, and it's a continuation. A couple months ago, which month was it? January, February? I can't quite remember. But Michael and I read the first two books from Lois Lowry's Giver Quartet. We read Giver and Messenger, and now we're going to read the rest of the quartet, which is Gathering Blue and Sun. Gathering Blue is a reread for me, but it was back in the 90s when it was a new book, and I've never read Sun. So I'm really interested, and I'll talk more about them when I get to them because I really have to refresh my memory to even give a description of these books. But the four books are all companion novels within kind of an overall kind of a Giver universe, but they're not direct sequels. They tend to take place in different villages. They don't even have the same genre. The Giver is a dystopian science fiction novel. And then Messenger was more of a fantasy. So I'm really interested to see how I would describe these two books. The next one is my selection for Magical Realism, which is the category this month in the Ben Reads Good Challenge. And I chose Himself by Jess Kidd. This is the only book by Jess Kidd that I haven't read, and it's her first novel. And once I read, the first book of hers I read was her most recent, The Night Ship, which I've talked at length about. And then I went back and acquired all the other ones. And I kind of read the other two in sort of a mad passion, but somehow I stopped short and I have not read Himself. She tends to include ghosts or spirits, or in one book it's kind of the spirits of the saints. So I'm sure that there's something funky that qualifies it for magical realism. So the time has come to read the book, and I'm looking forward to it because I really love Jess Kidd. I'm also continuing my reread of Kate Atkinson's Jackson Brodie series, and this month it is started early. Took my dog. I think it is book 4. I don't remember what it's about, but we'll talk about it when I get to it. I'm working my way back through this series leading up to the release of her new Jackson Brodie book later this year. And then I have one that is not part of any event of any kind. It's just a book I've been wanting to get back to and reread for quite a while. And I decided that now is the time. And that is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This particular book has 3 books in one, so it's not really that long. Originally published in 1937, and it has been so long since I've read this. I know I've read it a couple of times. I love this book. I am counting on still loving it. The short description is the wrenching yet inspiring story of Janie Crawford, a Black woman who refuses to live lost in sorrow, bitterness, fear, or foolish romantic dreams. That kind of boils it down quite a bit. And I just remember it's about Janie, and it's about tea cake, and it's heartbreaking, and it's beautifully written. I kind of saved it for May, anticipating that there might be a May of the Moderns, but it looks like that's not on this year. But I've just been wanting to reread this forever. I mean, I actively remember it was probably 5 years ago. I picked up another copy at a library book sale for my daughter, talking about how great it was. And I've just got to reread that now. And I still haven't done it. So I'm going, now is the time. And then this one may or may not happen, but it was at the library and it was an impulse checkout. And that is Village in the Dark by Iris Yamashita. And I read, this is a sequel. The first book was City Under One Roof, and it was a thriller I read last year about a town in Alaska that all is within one building because they're so isolated. And the winter is so harsh that everything is in this one high-rise building. And then, of course, there's a murder. And so we have a detective. And the detective she has her own things going on because she had a husband and a child who died, who got lost on a hike and died in kind of unexplained circumstances that she's never been quite satisfied about. There was a little cliffhanger right at the end of that book, so I don't know how that's going to play into this book. It's a different mystery, but it looks like it's going to be connected to the people from the first book. And so I picked it up because I liked the first one, and sometimes that fast-paced, escapist thriller kind of mood just descends upon me rather quickly. And it hasn't descended lately, so it's about time for a thriller and just a diversion kind of book. So I picked it up for fun. And then if I have time for anything else, well, you saw my haul, and you saw my last haul, and you saw the haul before that, and I haven't finished reading all the books from any of those, and my whole cart is full of wonderful books that I really want to read. So at any point in this month, extra books might materialize in Friday Reads. I might mix and match because mood happens, and my TBR is only a mere mountain of maybes and subject to change at any time. Although I have noticed that lately, I would say this past year more than the year before, my TBRs are pretty accurate. Like there used to be times where I would say, oh, here's the books, and I'd show 10 or 12 books, and I'd read 4 of those books and 6 of something else altogether. And now it seems like it's more accurate. Like I'm better at predicting what I'm actually going to want to read. Although I don't hold myself to anything. If I change my mind, that's fine. If I DNF, that's fine. If I get excited and read a different book, okay, because it's supposed to be fun. But I do like to have some kind of a plan and a rationale, and I like to participate in events. So with all of those disclaimers disclaiming, that is my May TBR. What are you excited about this month? What are you going to participate in? You're going to read anything that you saw in my pile, or have any comments about any of those, or what's going on? Just tell me what you want to tell me, and leave me a comment and a like, and I will be back on Friday for Friday Reads to talk about what I've been reading this week. So take care, and I'll see you then.